Guys, continuing on, excited to, come back and make videos on this channel. This is an emotional topic for me because I've invested a ton of time in my own personal life to watching Arthur Smith and to watching the Atlanta Falcons. I would say in my entire life, my favorite head coach that I've ever had in the National Football League. From cover to cover of watching the era and really paying attention to every single move, it's been Arthur Smith and it's been Terry Fontenot. It's been Arthur Smith and the Atlanta Falcons. I love the story of Arthur Smith, how he came from a very wealthy family in Fred Smith, how his dad was a Marine. His dad gambled the entire FedEx business before it was a big business on a game of blackjack in Vegas, made enough money to then, create FedEx and build an empire. But Arthur Smith had everything. He was the son of a very successful guy, and that's all well documented. With that's going to come a lot of animosity, a lot of people disliking you, a lot of jealousy, a lot of questions of nepotism in the process. But Arthur Smith said, you know what, I could just sit back and enjoy a luxurious life where I don't need to work that hard, or I can grind. And what he did was he went to North Carolina and he was a grad assistant there. And then he was a quality control coach for then the Washington Redskins in 2008. The Redskins had incredible coaches that were around there during that time. Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, all of those guys. Then Arthur Smith, being a native of Memphis, Tennessee, headed back down to the home state of Tennessee, and for about 10 years, he survived 3 different coaching regimes. He survived Ken Wisenhunt, then he went on the Mike Mularkey staff, and then Mike Vrabel kept him around. He was an offensive assistant. He was a data analyst there. He was a tight ends coach, an assistant offensive line coach, and then he became the offensive coordinator with Derrick Henry. And there, he illustrated the strengths of A.J. Brown. He worked with Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, and Ryan Tannehill resurrected his career, worked alongside Marcus Mariota, but of course, the biggest, most monumental career in which Arthur Smith helped guide is a guy that is such a great player that maybe, you could say he didn't need much help guiding, but it was Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry, just a great person, amazing football player. In my mind, going to be a Hall of Fame player. And that offense, succeeded expectation. They got a 1 seed one year. They won the AFC regular season. Then they went to New England and pretty much ended the Brady and Belichick era. And they beat Lamar Jackson when Lamar Jackson was at peak of powers, winning his first MVP award. They lit up Baltimore on that Saturday, and Arthur Smith, really had a successful offense of running the football. So you hired him in Atlanta because he's very detail-oriented. He's worked at every single role in terms of working with scouting, being a data analyst, working with tight ends, then being a coordinator. He worked every rung of the ladder, so to say. He climbed every rung of the ladder, even though he came from beneficial circumstances. So then Arthur Smith went to Atlanta, and the first year they had an aging Matt Ryan. They had to totally flip a roster that had been left for dead, and they were still competitive. They started out, I believe, 0-3, but then they scrapped to get to 7 wins, and they beat some decent teams in the process. Then the following year, they select Drake London, Arnold Ebiketie, build another draft class. Again, Mariota is a placeholder for then a third-round quarterback in Desmond Ridder. Again, they beat the 49ers at home. They beat Cleveland at home. They continue to scrap. They never get blown out. They're a scrappy team with Tyler Algier, a BYU fifth-round running back. They go 7-10 and, again, exceed expectations. Then this year was supposed to be the year that it took off. An incredibly easy schedule, which I said all along. Desmond Ridder finally having his time to be a franchise quarterback, Guy who says all the right things, won all the games at Cincinnati. Could he be another Dak Prescott, a quarterback taken in a mid-round that could be good? You know, a Nick Foles, a Russell Wilson, a Kirk Cousins. They start off shaky, but win 2 games. But then the wheels fall off in Detroit, get blown out there, go to London, play horribly, lose to the Washington Redskins at home, and then they lose to they lost to the Bucs, I believe, also at home. They went to Tennessee. Ritter was concussed, so he said he was. Terrible year. Lost to Carolina, lost on the road at Arizona. I know Kyler was back there, making that a more difficult game. I thought it would work with Arthur because of all of his years of working up the ladder, because he watched a very successful company being created in FedEx. He's very analytical. He not only looks at football, but all successful Fortune 500 companies. Utilized the talent in Tennessee on offense, but there were fatal flaws to the Arthur Smith regime, and I'll get to that right now. So the first flaw of Arthur Smith's regime is it's kind of like Joe Judge and a lot of coaches that I like. Really with the way that the rules are, I guess, with pass interferences and things, and with how great the defensive lines are in the National Football League, you creating a run scheme with a really immobile quarterback, or with a quarterback that's not amazingly mobile, that is not a ball carrier, that is not used to carrying the ball, you know, and Desmond Ritter's not going to tote the rock 15 times a game. He's thin. He can run a little bit in a straight line. He's not a guy who's going to go zone read, break a tackle, and who's comfortable getting physical yards and protecting the ball. So the reason I believe that, you know, Josh Allen, Herbert, but really looking at Baltimore is able to have a real great running scheme is because Lamar Jackson's a magician with the football. He knows how to get physical yards from the quarterback position. You can also look at Jalen Hurts and the run read option that they implemented last year. And when Hurts is really running at full speed, and last year he was just more effective running the ball, then you could create a run scheme. But in terms of just handing the ball off in pro style with an immobile quarterback, the odds of you just gashing a defense, even if you're trying to go stretch run, they're not that easy. And the offensive line was never able to create great holes consistently for Bijan or Tyler Algier. So you weren't able to run the ball at all. You build a team on running it. That's wrong. In football in the NFL, you got to create a team that is incredibly based on throwing the ball. You know, you gotta get a quarterback, and you got to create pass plays and throw the ball on first down to open up the passing game. That's what you got to do. And you look at the 49ers, I guess, as the blueprint. Also Atlanta, too. Not only did they have a quarterback that couldn't process that great in Heineke or Ritter, they also don't have wide receivers. So that was another failure. I think Drake London's a number 2/number 3 receiver. Big body wide receiver, pretty good player. Not even as good as like a Plexico Burress or even a Hakeem Nicks. Maybe he's Hakeem Nicks' level. I don't even think he's as good as him. Guy who can jump ball, catch it, doesn't create the best separation. Good complementary piece. I think that Kyle Pitts is faster, creates better set. I think Kyle Pitts can be better. They weren't able to get the ball to him, and that's a failure on Arthur Smith, not getting Bijan and Kyle the ball. But also, you got to go out there and you got to get a speedster in the slot. You know, if you're going to throw in the middle of the field, you need to get a speedster. And that's maybe what Malik Neighbors can be like in the NFL draft. You know, that's why the Dolphins have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They have speed. There's no speed on the wide receiver unit. You're trying out Mac Hollins, or you're trying to get Van Jefferson. Brian Edwards they signed, but you're trying to get Van Jefferson to be and Matt Collins to be your number 2 wide receivers, Kadarrell Hodge. Like, these aren't good enough players. You're too kind and too loyal. That was a failure as well. That's a separate failure. The failure is you hired your friend Dave Ragone, who you really trust. You hired Gray to run the defense, Dean Pease for a couple years, who was okay. You took a chance, I guess, with Ryan Nielsen, and it was okay, but he's a first-year defensive coordinator. I think that the Falcons, they played Trevor Siemian, Josh Dobbs, Bryce Young this year was really ineffective. They've played quarterbacks that are just abysmal players. Gardner Minshew, they got the easiest schedule. Jordan Love, when he was, really just a second overall start, basically. That's why the defense did better, because statistically, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, they never played great quarterbacks. That's why it was the easiest schedule ever. Whenever they played an offense whenever they played a quarterback that was pretty dynamic, you're talking about maybe a Fields or maybe even, Will Levis lit this defense up. Josh Dobbs lit them up. Justin Fields, Derek Carr, the second time around. Baker Mayfield led a game-winning touchdown drive. I know they lost Grady Jarrett. It was incredibly overrated defense. They're never going to talk about this defense. This defense, again, could have stopped Josh Dobbs. They could have came up with a turnover against Kyler Murray. Instead, they let him drive for a game-winning field goal. The Bucs drove down and beat Atlanta. This defense could never close out a game. They let Bryce Young go 90. Great defenses shut it down to finish games. But the offense, of course, did the defense no favors. They would always go 3 and out. Ritter can only read half of the field. So the team, poorly constructed, terrible offense. If they had a competent offense, they would have gotten beat in the wild card round, but they would have won this division. And that's it. Arthur Smith, this is why Joe Judge failed as well. Because you got to get a quarterback, and in the NFL, you have to create a scheme that is excellent. You have to create an excellent passing scheme. And Arthur Smith thought he could run the ball really in modern football without a mobile quarterback where the defensive linemen are just so good. I want to see it happen. I want to see a run-first team be successful. But I think you got to have a really mobile running quarterback, a dual threat to make that work. And the running scheme was abysmal. Teams would stack the box, and there was no one to beat them over the top. So if you're going to have a good run scheme, you got to have a balanced offense. There was no balance to this attack. Then he was too loyal. So I talked about Dave Ragone. I talked about Dean Pease, but really Jonnu Smith, Cordell Patterson. Unfortunately, these guys are great guys, Cordell, Jonnu Smith. Really, it should have been Bijan Robinson getting 80% of the carries, Tyler Algier getting 20%. Tyler Algier not breaking apart the huge runs. No Cordell Patterson at all. You could have used that position on another player. You tried to get Scotty Miller to be good for you in the slot. You just missed. You missed with Ragone. You missed with the wide receivers. You missed at quarterback. You didn't trade for a quarterback. And you didn't show Arthur Smith or anybody in the NFL that you can have a pass-first quarterback. And you didn't even try to get a Drew Lock or a really competent backup quarterback. And it's sad because the draft didn't really go Atlanta's way. Looking at the quarterbacks this year, it isn't like any rookie is really playing all that well. So they couldn't get inside the top 5, but they could have even signed Jarrett Stidham and rolled with him. And I don't know. It's not easy to get a quarterback, and they never made overtures to get a quarterback. And that was the problem. And then the problem was the offensive scheme. When you take these players in the top 10, the pressure on you to succeed with these players is monumentally, a ton of pressure. And, thinking back on it, I do wish Arthur got a chance with a Bo Nix or a Jaden Daniels, but, I mean, Drake London and Kyle Pitts, I mean, for him to have this little usage is really probably the thing that did him in. And even against terrible teams, even against Tampa where you outplay them completely, or even against like the Panthers or the Jets they barely win. These are always ugly games and always ugly wins. Only one time on an offensive-led team did they go over 30. And I know that Arthur Smith likes ball control offense, but if he's going to evolve as a coach, he's going to maybe Arthur Smith should be an assistant on a staff with a pass-first coordinator. I think you should go to the Shanahan tree and learn about the passing concepts of the West Coast offense. See like a Justin Herbert, see a Dak Prescott, real competent quarterback play. Go to a Mike McDaniel, and he needs to take notes and continue to improve, because once Arthur Smith can learn how to create throw game, then he can become like an Andy Reid or even a Mike McCarthy. And great guy by all accounts. I believe he can do it. I believe that he can find out ways to open up his playbook to be a passing first offensive coordinator that includes the run. And once he's a balanced OC, he'll take lessons that he learned from Atlanta, being you got to have a way immediately to go get your quarterback. And maybe Arthur Smith needed to trade up to that third overall pick and take your Anthony Richardson. And maybe Anthony Richardson then, if you took Richardson as a quarterback and Anthony Richardson succeeded, could you imagine what happened? Or could you imagine if Arthur Smith had C.J. Stroud? The Falcons could have won the NFC South if they traded up for a player of that magnitude. You know, could they have went after a Geno Smith or a Drew Lock or a Jordan Love and been proactive? The first thing that these new coaches have to do when they get to their destinations is they got to have a quarterback that is effective, and that's the only way that they're going to survive, is if you have competent and effective quarterback play. And if Brian Daboll goes down this road, he's gonna also lose his job. So it's sad, because I loved everything that Arthur stood for, meaning loved hard work, loved trench play, loved physical football, guy who was very accountable, hard on himself, guy who carried an attitude that the team really, I think the locker room bought into, an us against the world mentality. At times, was he too chippy with reporters? Yes. He tried to go on McAfee, continue to clean up that image a little bit, did that, but the team wasn't winning. He's got to continue to be lighter, a little more loose. I think at times the team played tight. Even though they turned it over a lot, I think the team played tight. I think that's his personality a little bit, is to have everything so organized that he's kind of pressing the offense too tight, where he needs to, like Andy Reid, kind of like lets the quarterbacks just go out there and be gunslingers like Brett Favre and Patrick Mahomes. If Arthur Smith can continue to open it up, relax and dial it back, but in ways expand the passing game, that's my best advice for his career. But I think he's incredibly introspective. I think that his schemes are, he takes in analytics well. He runs a lot of under center stuff. He has some good shot plays. He runs really good zone running scheme. He runs some misdirection. He really does have some talent in terms of calling plays and dialing up plays. In terms of building a culture, he has talent. They've turned around the culture in Atlanta. They're a bunch of great guys. They got Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell to commit to them. But their young players are just great guys. Like A.J. Terrell's a great leader. Drake London, even Kyle Pitts really bought in. Tyler Algier, Chris Lindstrom. Like, there's real building blocks in Atlanta and that he was able to build. And that's why it's so sad it never happened. And this year, when they lost to Carolina, when they lost to Tampa, they had such an easy schedule, and you put all the pressure on yourself by drafting Drake so high. When you have Bijan Robinson, you have all these fantasy players that don't know about Atlanta but will complain. The external noise, if you don't get the football a lot, the external noise will get to the ownership group. And when you lose games to the worst teams in the NFL, when you lose in Carolina, when you get blown out by Chicago and New Orleans to finish out the year, when you show you can't really develop offense. Like, look at Kevin O'Connell. Even though they didn't make the playoffs, Nick Mullins is still throwing for 400 yards a game. So in the modern NFL, like, get those chunk plays, get those explosives. You know, in 1990 or 2000 NFL, everybody was under center. There wasn't as much great quarterback play. Teams weren't getting those chunk plays at the highest of levels. The receivers are thinner and faster. You can't play defense in the same physical manner. Pass interferences and holdings and illegal contacts, they set up the game at the pro level especially. Saw Michigan shut them down with defense. The pro level, the NFL level, is about creating pass plays that are explosive pass plays. Fans want to see finesse, pass plays. It's safer. It's prettier to watch for the consumer. Everybody loves that Bills-Chiefs game where I, like, maybe a little contrarian, I liked it, but still said, wish that there can be a little bit of defense played. I have to admit I liked it. Just maybe being a contrarian too much, but I wanted to see a run-first scheme work. Contrarian point of view, but really good offense is really fun to watch. Shootouts are fun, you know, a lot of the time. But so is balance, and so is physical run game, and so is physicality. A balance of it is perfect. A balance of it is brilliant and perfect to watch. But are for never at a quarterback. And that's the downfall of like 90% of these guys that get fired due to on-field matters, due to losing games. There's coaches that get fired due to scandal a good amount. But guys, I can't make it due to throwing the football. And I bet that ownership said that they couldn't roll Fritter anymore, and the fan base completely didn't believe in Arthur, and in ways they had reason to. First 2 years were rebuilding. This was the first year he underachieved, but no development of quarterback play and a bad eye for selecting the quarterback. Trying to survive on a run game scheme with a supporting cast as your quarterback. Thank you guys for watching. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.